I sat across from my husband David at Romano's, our anniversary dinner location for the past 5 years. The candlelight flickered between us, casting shadows that suddenly seemed ominous rather than romantic. While I was reading the dessert menu, I caught something in my peripheral vision that made my blood freeze. David had just slipped something small and white into my wine glass. My heart stopped beating for what felt like an eternity. 24 hours earlier, I had found strange pills in his coat pocket and dismissed my suspicions as paranoid thoughts. Now, watching his nervous smile as he raised his glass for a toast, I realized my marriage of 8 years might be built on lies I never imagined possible. I excused myself to the restroom, my legs feeling unsteady as I walked through the dimly lit restaurant. My mind was racing with 1,000 different explanations, each one more terrifying than the last. Maybe it was a surprise, maybe it was vitamins, maybe I had imagined the whole thing. But deep in my gut, I knew something was very wrong. The restroom was empty, except for one woman washing her hands at the sink. She was in her 30s with kind brown eyes and an expression that seemed troubled. As I entered, she looked up at me through the mirror with what appeared to be genuine concern. "Excuse me," she said hesitantly, turning to face me directly. "I know this is going to sound crazy, but I work here as a server, and I saw your husband put something in your drink." My stomach dropped to the floor. "What did you say?" "My name is Sarah Martinez, and I have been working at Romano's for 3 years. I was refilling water glasses at the table behind you when I witnessed your husband slip what looked like a small white pill into your wine glass. I debated saying anything because I know how this sounds, but I could not stay silent. I stared at her, trying to process what she was telling me. You must be mistaken. David would never do something like that. We are celebrating our anniversary." Sarah's expression grew more serious. "I have seen this behavior before with other couples who have dined here. It never turned out well. He was very careful about it, looking around to make sure no one was watching. But I noticed because I have learned to watch for these signs." The sincerity in her voice was unmistakable. She described exactly what I had witnessed, down to the way David had glanced around nervously before dropping the pill into my glass. There was no way she could have known those details if she had not actually seen it happen. "What happened to the other couples you mentioned?" I asked, though I was not sure I wanted to hear the answer. "The women always ended up acting strangely after drinking whatever their partners had given them. Slurred speech, loss of coordination, confusion. Their partners would then help them to their cars, claiming they had suddenly become ill. I never saw those women come back to the restaurant." My hands began to shake. "What should I do?" "That is up to you. But if I were in your position, I would not drink anything he gave me. Trust your instincts. You know your husband better than anyone." I thanked Sarah and returned to the table, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure everyone in the restaurant could hear it. David looked up at me with what I had always thought was a loving smile, but now it seemed forced and calculating. "Everything okay, sweetheart?" he asked, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "You look a little pale." "I am fine, just feeling a bit emotional about our anniversary," I replied, forcing myself to smile. 8 years together feels like a lifetime." "It certainly does," he said, raising his wine glass. "To many more years of our perfect marriage." As he spoke, I noticed he kept glancing at my untouched wine glass. His leg was bouncing under the table, and he checked his watch twice in the span of 30 seconds. These were nervous habits I had never noticed before, or perhaps I had never had reason to look for them. "David, I love that cologne you are wearing tonight," I said, leaning across the table as if to kiss his cheek. In that moment, with his attention focused on my face, I managed to quickly switch our wine glasses. The movement was so subtle that I was certain he had not noticed. "Thank you. It is the same one I always wear," he replied, but his eyes immediately went to the wine glasses. For just a split second, I saw confusion cross his face, but then he seemed to dismiss whatever concern he had. "Shall we make that toast now?" I suggested, lifting what had originally been his glass. "Absolutely," he said, though he seemed increasingly eager for me to drink. I noticed him checking his watch again, and there was a strange urgency in his movements that I had never seen before. I pretended to take small sips while David drank more freely from what he believed was his own glass. Within 10 minutes, something extraordinary happened. David began slurring his words, but instead of being confused or alarmed, he started laughing. "It is working faster than planned," he mumbled with a satisfied grin. Then his eyes widened in horror as the realization of what he had just said hit him. He looked down at his wine glass, then at mine, then back at his own. "No, no, no," he whispered, his face going completely white. The man I had been married to for 8 years, the man I had trusted with my life and my heart, had just revealed that he had intentionally tried to drug me. The pills in his pocket, the nervous behavior, the constant checking of his watch. It all made perfect sense now. But what terrified me most was not knowing what he had planned to do to me once those drugs had taken effect. David's condition deteriorated rapidly over the next few minutes. His speech became increasingly slurred, and he began losing coordination. To anyone watching, it would have appeared that he was having some sort of medical emergency. I played the role of the concerned wife perfectly, helping him stand and guiding him toward the exit. "Poor David seems to have had too much to drink," I announced to the nearby tables, loud enough for several people to hear. "I need to get him home right away." As I helped him to our car, his phone began buzzing repeatedly in his jacket pocket. Each notification sound sent a chill down my spine because I could see him trying to reach for it with his increasingly unsteady hands, but his motor skills were too impaired to complete the action. "Need to answer," he mumbled. "Important calls. Do not worry about the phone right now," I said gently, buckling his seatbelt. "You need to rest." During the 20-minute drive to our house, David drifted in and out of consciousness. When he was awake, he mumbled incoherently about plans and timing and money. Most of it was incomprehensible, but certain phrases stood out. "Should have worked by now. The money is ready." And she was supposed to be confused. Each word confirmed my worst fears about what he had intended to do to me. When we arrived home, I helped David into our bedroom where he immediately collapsed onto the bed. Within minutes, he was unconscious. That was when I finally allowed myself to examine his phone, which had been buzzing constantly throughout the drive home. The messages were all from someone listed in his contacts as M. The texts painted a horrifying picture. "Is it done yet? The money is ready for transfer. Remember, you need to document everything for the paperwork. How long until she shows symptoms? The lawyer is standing by." My hands trembled as I scrolled through months of communications between David and this mysterious M. The messages revealed a calculated plan that had been in development for far longer than just tonight. David was supposed to drug me so that I would appear mentally unstable, and someone else was supposed to document my erratic behavior. The contact information revealed that M was actually Marcus Thornfield, a private investigator based in downtown Chicago. Their text exchanges showed that Marcus had been hired to gather evidence of my supposed mental instability, which would then be used in legal proceedings. But legal proceedings for what purpose? I continued searching through David's phone and found a folder labeled Legal Documents that contained files I had never seen before. There were psychiatric evaluation forms with my name on them, all completely fabricated. According to these documents, I had been experiencing severe depression, anxiety attacks, paranoid delusions, and episodes of aggressive behavior toward David. None of it was true, but the documentation looked official and professional. The most chilling discovery was a series of emails between David and a lawyer named Robert Chen. The emails discussed the process for having someone declared mentally incompetent and the legal requirements for gaining control over their assets. The correspondence mentioned my recently deceased grandmother and the $300,000 I had inherited just 6 months ago. My inheritance. That was what this was about. But as I dug deeper into David's digital footprint, I found something even more disturbing. Hidden in a folder marked Security System, I discovered video files that showed various rooms in our house. David had been secretly recording me for weeks, capturing footage of me during my most private moments. The recordings focused on times when I appeared tired, stressed, or emotional. There were clips of me crying after difficult days at work, footage of me talking to myself while cooking dinner, and videos of me looking confused when I could not find items that had apparently been moved from their usual places. Someone watching these videos without context might indeed think I was struggling with mental health issues, but now I realized David had been deliberately creating situations to make me appear unstable, then recording my natural reactions to use as evidence against me. The final piece of the puzzle came when I found David's laptop hidden behind books in his office. The search history revealed months of research into psychiatric medications, specifically lithium and its effects on cognitive function. There were detailed articles about symptoms of lithium poisoning, fatigue, memory problems, confusion, and difficulty concentrating. All the symptoms I had been experiencing for the past 3 months. I rushed to our kitchen and began examining our food supplies with new eyes. In the back of our spice cabinet, hidden behind containers of oregano and basil, I found a small bottle of lithium carbonate pills. The prescription was not in David's name or mine. It was prescribed to someone named Patricia Coleman, a name I did not recognize. David had been slowly poisoning me for months, documenting my symptoms and preparing to have me declared mentally incompetent so he could gain control of my inheritance. The realization hit me like a physical blow. The man I had trusted completely had been systematically destroying my health and planning to steal my future. But who was Patricia Coleman? And how did David get access to her medication? The questions were multiplying faster than I could find answers, and I knew that David's unconscious state would not last forever. Soon, he would wake up and realize that his plan had failed catastrophically. While David remained unconscious from the drugs he had intended for me, I continued my investigation with a growing sense of urgency. Every discovery revealed new layers to his deception, and I knew I had to uncover the full scope of his betrayal before he woke up. In David's office, I found a second cell phone hidden inside a hollowed-out book on financial planning. The irony of that hiding place was not lost on me. This phone contained a completely different set of contacts and communications that painted an even more devastating picture of my husband's double life. The phone was filled with intimate photos and romantic text messages between David and someone named Jennifer Walsh. At first, the name did not mean anything to me, but as I read through their exchanges, a terrible realization dawned on me. Jennifer Walsh was my therapist. For the past 6 months, David had been encouraging me to see Dr. Walsh for what he claimed were stress-related issues from my grandmother's death. He had found her contact information, scheduled my first appointment, and even driven me to her office for the initial consultation. I had thought he was being supportive during a difficult time in my life. Now I understood the real reason behind his encouragement. The text messages between David and Jennifer revealed that she had been feeding him detailed information from our therapy sessions. Every insecurity I had shared, every moment of vulnerability, every private thought I had confided to her in the safety of what I believed was a confidential therapeutic relationship had been reported back to my husband. But their relationship went far beyond professional collaboration. The messages were filled with romantic declarations and explicit content that made me physically ill to read. David had been telling Jennifer that he loved her, that he was going to leave me as soon as their plan was complete, and that they would start a new life together using my inheritance money. Jennifer had been responding with equal enthusiasm, expressing her excitement about their future together and her willingness to provide whatever professional documentation David needed to support his case against me. "The evaluation forms are ready," one of her messages read. "I can testify that she exhibits clear signs of paranoid delusions and poses a potential threat to herself and others. The court will have no choice but to approve the commitment." Another message from Jennifer stated, "I have documented 3 months of sessions where she has exhibited increasingly erratic behavior. Her mental state has clearly deteriorated significantly since I began treating her. None of these documented behaviors had actually occurred during our sessions." Jennifer was completely fabricating her professional observations to support David's scheme. As I continued reading, I discovered that David had been systematically isolating me from friends and family over the past year. Text messages showed that he had been intercepting my mail, including invitations to social events and job opportunities that I never knew existed. My friend Katie from college had apparently sent me multiple invitations to her wedding, but I never received them. A company in Seattle had offered me a position with a $20,000 salary increase, but the offer letter never reached me. My sister had been trying to plan a surprise visit for my birthday, but David had convinced her that I was too stressed to handle visitors. Every connection to the outside world that might have provided me with support or alternative perspectives had been quietly severed by my own husband. I found a rental agreement for an apartment across town that David had been paying for over the past 4 months. The lease was in both his name and Jennifer's name. They had been living together part-time while maintaining the illusion of David's faithful marriage to me. The financial records I discovered were equally devastating. David had been slowly draining our joint bank accounts and transferring money to offshore accounts that I had no access to. Over the past 6 months, he had moved nearly $50,000 out of our shared savings, always in amounts small enough to avoid triggering automatic bank notifications. But the most shocking discovery was a folder labeled Legal Preparation that contained documents I never could have imagined. David had already filed preliminary paperwork to have me declared mentally incompetent. There was a court date scheduled for the following Wednesday, just 5 days away. Jennifer Walsh had written a comprehensive psychological evaluation recommending immediate psychiatric intervention. According to her professional opinion, I was suffering from severe depression with psychotic features, paranoid delusions about my husband's fidelity, and increasingly aggressive behavior that posed a danger to both myself and others. The evaluation recommended that I be committed to a psychiatric facility for intensive treatment and that David be granted legal guardianship over my person and finances during my recovery period. Everything had been planned down to the smallest detail. If their scheme had worked tonight, if I had consumed the drugged wine and exhibited the expected symptoms, David would have had all the documentation needed to have me committed by the end of the week. Once I was locked away in a psychiatric facility, unable to defend myself or access legal representation, David and Jennifer would have had complete control over my inheritance and could have disappeared together to start their new life. The elaborate nature of their plan was both impressive and terrifying. They had thought of everything, covered every possible angle, and manipulated every system that was supposed to protect vulnerable people. But they had made one crucial mistake. They had underestimated my ability to trust my instincts and take action when something felt wrong. The woman in the restaurant, Sarah Martinez, had given me the warning I needed to turn their own plan against them. Now David was unconscious from his own drugs, and I had access to all the evidence I needed to expose their conspiracy. But I also knew that time was running out. Once David woke up and realized what had happened, he would undoubtedly try to activate emergency protocols to salvage their plan. I needed help, and I needed it fast. I called the number for Sarah Martinez that she had given me at the restaurant, praying that she would answer her phone at this late hour. When she picked up after the third ring, I could hear the concern in her voice immediately. "Bella, is that you? Are you safe? I need your help," I said, my voice shaking. "Everything you suspected was true, but it is so much worse than either of us imagined. Where are you now?" "I am at home. David is unconscious from the drugs he meant for me, but I do not know how long that will last. I have found evidence of a massive conspiracy, and I think there are other victims. Stay where you are. I am coming over right now." Sarah arrived at my house within 20 minutes, and when I opened the door, I could see she was carrying a large bag filled with what looked like recording equipment and documents. "Before we go any further, I need to tell you something," she said as she entered. "I am not just a server at Romanos. I am actually an undercover journalist investigating financial exploitation and elder abuse in the Chicago area. I have been working on a story about couples who prey on recently widowed or inherited women. The revelation was shocking, but in a good way." "You mean you are already investigating this type of crime?" "For the past 8 months, I have been documenting a pattern of suspicious activity at various restaurants and social venues around the city. Your husband's behavior tonight matched exactly what I have been observing with other couples." Sarah spread her documents across my dining room table, and what I saw made my blood run cold. There were photographs, financial records, and case files for multiple women who had been victimized by similar schemes. Marcus Thornfield, the private investigator your husband has been working with, has been running these operations with a network of accomplices across 3 different states. They target women who have recently come into money through inheritance, divorce settlements, or insurance payouts. She showed me files for Patricia Coleman, the name I had seen on the lithium prescription bottle. Patricia was a 62-year-old widow whose husband had died in a car accident, leaving her with a substantial life insurance settlement. She had been successfully institutionalized 18 months ago after exhibiting what her family believed were signs of a complete mental breakdown. Patricia tried to contact the authorities before she was committed, claiming that her new boyfriend was drugging her and stealing her money. But by the time she reached out for help, Marcus Thornfield had already documented months of erratic behavior, and her boyfriend had testimony from a therapist confirming her mental instability. The parallels to my own situation were terrifying and exact. Sarah continued. We tracked down Patricia 6 months ago. She is currently living in a state psychiatric facility, and her boyfriend has legal control over her entire estate. She has been trying to convince doctors that she was framed, but her medical records show a clear pattern of mental illness that makes her claims seem like paranoid delusions. How many other women have been victimized? We have identified at least 12 women across Illinois, Wisconsin, and Indiana. The pattern is always the same. They meet a charming man who seems perfect. The relationship moves quickly to marriage or cohabitation. Then the woman starts experiencing symptoms that appear to be mental health related. A private investigator documents strange behavior. A therapist provides professional verification of mental instability. And the woman ends up committed while her partner gains control of her assets. Sarah pulled out another file labeled Network Associates that contained photographs and background information on the entire criminal operation. In addition to Marcus Thornfield and Jennifer Walsh, there was Dr. Richard Hayes, a psychiatrist who had been providing false diagnoses in exchange for a percentage of stolen assets. Dr. Hayes has been the key to legitimizing these operations, Sarah explained. He provides official psychiatric evaluations that support commitment proceedings, and his reputation in the medical community makes his recommendations nearly impossible to challenge. How much money are we talking about? Based on the cases we have documented, this network has stolen over $4 million from vulnerable women over the past 3 years. Each operation typically nets between $200,000 and $800,000, depending on the victim's assets. I felt sick thinking about all the women whose lives had been destroyed by this elaborate criminal enterprise. But Sarah's next revelation was even more disturbing. Your husband David has been involved in this network longer than just your case. We found records indicating that his previous wife, Margaret, died under suspicious circumstances 2 years ago. She had recently inherited property from her parents, and David was the primary beneficiary of her life insurance policy. David told me that Margaret died from complications related to diabetes. The official cause of death was diabetic ketoacidosis, but the symptoms can be artificially induced through insulin manipulation. The case was never investigated as a potential homicide because David appeared to be a grieving husband, and there was no obvious motive. The realization that I might be married to a murderer was almost too much to process. How many women had David victimized before me? How long had he been perfecting his techniques of manipulation and exploitation? Sarah's phone rang, interrupting my spiraling thoughts. The call was from her editor at the newspaper where she worked. What do you mean he contacted the police? Sarah said into the phone. Her face went pale as she listened to the response. When did this happen? She hung up and turned to me with obvious urgency. David has regained consciousness and called 911, claiming that you have had a complete mental breakdown and are holding him hostage. Police units are being dispatched to this address right now, but he was unconscious when I left him in the bedroom. He must have been pretending to be more affected by the drugs than he actually was. This is exactly the type of emergency protocol these networks use when their initial plans fail. We could already hear sirens in the distance, growing closer by the second. David had managed to activate the final phase of his plan even while incapacitated, and now law enforcement was racing to our house to rescue him from his supposedly dangerous and mentally unstable wife. We need to leave immediately, Sarah said, grabbing her documents and equipment. If the police find you here with David in his current condition, his story will seem credible, and you will be taken into custody for psychiatric evaluation. As we rushed toward the back door, I could see police cars turning onto our street. The nightmare was far from over, and now I was running from the very people who were supposed to protect me from criminals like my husband. Sarah and I escaped through my backyard just as police cars surrounded the front of my house. We could hear officers knocking on the door and announcing themselves, but we were already 3 blocks away, driving toward downtown Chicago in Sarah's car. Where are we going? I asked, my heart still racing from our narrow escape. We need to reach the courthouse before David's team can file emergency paperwork for your commitment. Once they have official documents in the system, it becomes much harder to prove your sanity and competence. As we drove, Sarah called her journalism contacts and arranged for us to meet with FBI agent Lisa Chen, who had been investigating financial crimes in the Chicago area. Agent Chen agreed to meet us at the federal building, even though it was nearly midnight. Agent Chen has been building a case against financial exploitation networks for 2 years, Sarah explained. She has been waiting for someone with inside access to one of these operations. But our race against time became more complicated when Sarah received another call from her editor. David's story to the police had been convincing enough that they were now issuing a be on the lookout alert for me as a potentially dangerous person who might be experiencing a psychotic episode. According to the police report, David had told officers that I had been acting erratically for months, that I had accused him of having an affair with my therapist, and that I had drugged his wine at dinner before bringing him home and threatening him with violence. His version of events was a perfect inversion of the truth, but without access to the evidence I had gathered, it would be impossible to immediately disprove his claims. "We discovered something else while you were gathering your evidence tonight," Sarah said as we approached the federal building. "The network has connections within the local family court system. Judge William Harrison, who would normally preside over commitment hearings, has financial relationships with several of the psychiatrists involved in these schemes." "You mean the court system is corrupt too?" "Not the entire system, but enough key positions to make their operations much easier. They have spent years building relationships and placing people in positions where they can influence outcomes." Agent Chen met us in the lobby of the federal building, and she was already familiar with much of the information Sarah had been gathering. However, the evidence I had collected from David's phone and computer provided the final pieces she needed to move forward with arrests. "This network operates across state lines, which brings it under federal jurisdiction for organized crime," Agent Chen explained. "With your evidence, we can arrest everyone involved tonight." But as she examined the documents I had brought, Agent Chen discovered something that changed our timeline dramatically. According to these financial records, David and Jennifer are planning to leave the country tonight. They have tickets for a flight to the Cayman Islands that departs at 6 a.m., less than 6 hours from now. "Can you stop them at the airport?" "We can, but we need more direct evidence of their crimes. Everything we have so far is circumstantial or could be explained away by clever lawyers. We need recorded confessions or evidence of them actively committing crimes." Sarah suggested that we set up a sting operation where I would contact David and pretend to surrender, claiming that I wanted to get psychiatric help. With proper surveillance, we might be able to get him and his accomplices to reveal details about their operation. "It is extremely risky," Agent Chen warned. "If something goes wrong, you could end up committed to a psychiatric facility before we can intervene." "What choice do I have? If they escape tonight, they will disappear forever, and other women will continue to be victimized." While Agent Chen arranged for surveillance equipment and backup agents, Sarah and I broke into Marcus Thornfield's office building using her investigative skills and lock-picking tools. We needed to gather additional evidence that would strengthen the federal case. Marcus' office was filled with files on dozens of women across multiple states. The scope of the criminal network was far larger than any of us had imagined. There were detailed psychological profiles, financial assessments, and operational plans for targeting vulnerable women. We found a wall map with pins marking locations where successful operations had been completed, and other pins showing potential targets currently under surveillance. The level of organization and planning was sophisticated enough to rival legitimate business operations. Most importantly, we discovered that Patricia Coleman and 2 other women were being held in facilities under false pretenses, with their families believing they were genuinely mentally ill. Sarah photographed everything while I searched for evidence related to Margaret, David's deceased wife. In a file labeled Archived Operations, I found medical records showing that Margaret had been experiencing symptoms consistent with insulin poisoning in the weeks before her death. The evidence suggested that David had been slowly killing his previous wife, while making it appear that her diabetes was simply becoming more difficult to manage. As we were leaving Marcus' office, Sarah received an urgent call from Agent Chen. "We have a problem. Dr. Richard Hayes, the psychiatrist involved in the network, has just called the main FBI office claiming that he has information about a criminal conspiracy and wants to cooperate with federal investigators." Is not that a good thing? Maybe, but it also might mean that the network knows we are closing in on them and they are trying to control the narrative. "Dr. Hayes wants to meet with you personally before he will provide any information to federal agents. This new development could either be the break we needed to expose the entire conspiracy, or it could be a trap designed to deliver me directly into the hands of the people who wanted to destroy my life. We had less than 4 hours before David and Jennifer's flight departed, and every decision we made could determine whether justice would be served or whether they would escape to continue victimizing other women around the world. Dr. Richard Hayes contacted Agent Chen with a proposal that was as surprising as it was suspicious. He claimed that he had been secretly documenting the entire conspiracy because Marcus Thornfield had been threatening his family, and he was willing to testify against the network in exchange for protection. I have recordings of every conversation, every planning session, every criminal act they have committed, Dr. Hayes told Agent Chen over the phone. But I will only turn over the evidence if I can speak with Bella Morrison directly. She deserves to hear the truth about what they planned to do to her. Agent Chen was skeptical, but she agreed to arrange the meeting because the potential evidence could be crucial for prosecuting the entire network. However, she insisted on full surveillance and backup agents positioned throughout the meeting location. Dr. Hayes suggested that we meet at O'Hare International Airport, where David and Jennifer would be arriving for their 6 a.m. flight to the Cayman Islands. He claimed this would allow us to confront all the conspirators simultaneously while preventing their escape. This feels like a trap, Sarah said as we prepared for the confrontation. Everything about this situation feels like a trap, I replied. But if Dr. Hayes really has recordings of their planning sessions, it could save other women from going through what I have experienced. Agent Chen equipped me with a wire and positioned federal agents throughout the airport terminal. Sarah would monitor the situation from the FBI surveillance van while staying in constant communication with the field agents. At 4:30 a.m., I walked into Terminal 2 of O'Hare Airport, not knowing whether I was about to expose a criminal conspiracy or walk directly into the final phase of their plan to destroy my life. Dr. Hayes was waiting for me near the departure gate, carrying a briefcase that he claimed contained all the evidence we needed. He was a distinguished-looking man in his 60s with gray hair and an expensive suit that suggested a successful medical practice. Bella, I am so sorry for what you have been put through, he said as I approached. I have been trying to find a way to expose this network for months, but they threatened to harm my daughter if I went to the authorities. Where are the recordings you mentioned? They are all here, he said, patting the briefcase. But before I turn them over, you need to understand the full scope of what David and his associates planned for you. Dr. Hayes began describing details about the conspiracy that matched everything I had already discovered. He knew about the lithium poisoning, the falsified therapy reports, the planned court proceedings, and the offshore financial accounts. But as he continued talking, I noticed that he kept checking his watch and glancing toward the security checkpoint. Something about his behavior reminded me of David's nervous energy at the restaurant. Dr. Hayes, why did you agree to participate in this conspiracy in the first place? They promised me a percentage of the recovered assets, and they convinced me that we were helping mentally unstable women get the treatment they needed. I did not realize until later that we were destroying innocent lives. His explanation sounded rehearsed, and I began to suspect that this meeting was not what it appeared to be. Then I saw David and Jennifer approaching the gate area with their luggage, moving as if they were simply catching a flight rather than fleeing from law enforcement. They showed no signs of distress or urgency that you would expect from people running from the authorities. Dr. Hayes, are David and Jennifer supposed to be here? Yes. I asked them to come because I want them to hear my confession and understand that I will no longer be part of their operation. But as David and Jennifer got closer, I could see they were both smiling with a confidence that suggested they were not worried about being arrested. David spotted me and waved as if we were meeting for a pleasant social occasion. Hello, sweetheart, he said when he reached our group. Dr. Hayes told us that you finally realized you need professional help for your mental health issues. I am so proud of you for taking this step. Jennifer nodded sympathetically. Bella, I know this is difficult, but recognizing that you have a problem is the first step toward recovery. That was when I understood what was actually happening. Dr. Hayes had not contacted the FBI to expose the conspiracy. He had contacted them to provide what he claimed was evidence of my mental instability. The recordings in his briefcase were probably fabricated conversations designed to support their narrative that I was having paranoid delusions about my loving husband. Agent Chen, can you hear me? I said quietly, hoping my wire was still functioning. We hear you, Bella. Stay calm and keep them talking. Dr. Hayes opened his briefcase and pulled out what appeared to be a psychiatric evaluation form with my name on it. Bella, I have been reviewing your case with David and Jennifer, and we all agree that you need immediate intervention. Your paranoid delusions about your husband having an affair and trying to poison you are clear indicators of a serious psychological break from reality. Those are not delusions. I have evidence of everything I have accused them of doing. That is exactly what someone with paranoid delusions would say, Jennifer interjected. Bella, you have been my patient for 6 months. I have documented your progressive deterioration, and I am recommending immediate commitment for intensive treatment. David produced a set of legal documents from his carry-on bag. I have temporary guardianship papers that will allow me to make medical decisions for you until you recover. The ambulance is already on its way to transport you to a private facility where you can get the help you need. They had turned my attempt to expose them into their final opportunity to have me committed. The meeting with Dr. Hayes had been designed to get me to a public location where they could implement their backup plan with witnesses present. But then something unexpected happened that changed everything. Actually, there is something all of you should know, Dr. Hayes said, his demeanor suddenly shifting. I have been recording every conversation we have had over the past 6 months, including this one, because I was afraid you would eventually try to silence me. He pulled a small digital recorder from his pocket and set it on a nearby chair where everyone could see it. David, would you like to tell Bella about what really happened to your previous wife, Margaret? David's confident expression faltered. I do not know what you are talking about. I mean, the insulin overdoses you gave her before she died. You bragged about how easy it was to make her death look like a diabetic complication. Jennifer started to back away from our group, clearly recognizing that the situation was spiraling out of control. Dr. Hayes, what are you doing? She demanded. I am doing what I should have done months ago. I am telling the truth. He turned to me and continued, Bella, everything you discovered about their plan was accurate, but there is something else you need to know. David and his associates have been running this operation for over 5 years, and they have successfully victimized more than 30 women across 6 different states. David lunged toward the digital recorder, but Agent Chen and 2 other FBI agents appeared from nearby waiting areas and immediately placed him under arrest. David Morrison, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted murder, and racketeering, Agent Chen announced as she handcuffed him. Jennifer tried to run toward the security checkpoint, but additional agents were waiting to intercept her. Marcus Thornfield, who had apparently been waiting in a different part of the terminal, was also taken into custody along with 2 other associates I did not recognize. Dr. Hayes handed his briefcase to Agent Chen and confirmed that it contained recordings, financial records, and documentation of the entire criminal network. My daughter was never threatened, he admitted to me. I participated in this conspiracy because I was greedy, and I convinced myself that we were providing a service by helping wealthy women manage their mental health. But when I learned about Margaret's death and realized we were potentially involved in murder, I knew I had to document everything and find a way to expose the truth. As federal agents led David away in handcuffs, he turned back to me with an expression of pure hatred. You have no idea what you have done, he said. You will never be able to prove any of this in court. But Agent Chen was already explaining how the evidence we had gathered, combined with Dr. Hayes' recordings, provided overwhelming proof of the conspiracy. Patricia Coleman and 2 other women who had been wrongfully committed were going to be released from psychiatric facilities and provided with legal assistance to recover their stolen assets. The network had been completely dismantled, and federal prosecutors were preparing charges that would likely result in decades of prison time for everyone involved. As I watched David being escorted toward a federal transport vehicle, I realized that the nightmare was finally over. But I also understood that recovery from this betrayal would be a long and difficult process that would require time, therapy, and the support of people who genuinely cared about my well-being. The trial began 6 months later, and the evidence against David and his associates was overwhelming. Dr. Hayes' recordings revealed the full extent of their criminal enterprise, including detailed discussions about Margaret's murder and plans for targeting future victims. During the proceedings, Patricia Coleman testified about her wrongful commitment and the 18 months she had spent trying to convince doctors that she was the victim of a criminal conspiracy. Her testimony was heartbreaking, but it also demonstrated the resilience and strength that all of us survivors possessed. Two other women, Susan Walsh from Wisconsin and Maria Rodriguez from Indiana, also testified about their experiences with the network. Their stories were remarkably similar to mine, with the same pattern of romantic manipulation, systematic isolation, gradual poisoning, and falsified mental health evaluations. The prosecution presented evidence that the network had stolen over $4 million from 37 different women across 6 states over a 5-year period. Each operation had been carefully planned and executed with the precision of a professional business. David received a sentence of 25 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. The judge cited the murder of Margaret Morrison and the attempted murder of multiple other victims as aggravating factors that justified the maximum possible punishment. Jennifer Walsh lost her license to practice psychology and received a 15-year sentence for her role in the conspiracy. Her betrayal of the therapeutic relationship was particularly devastating because it violated the trust that vulnerable people placed in mental health professionals. Marcus Thornfield and the other associates received sentences ranging from 10 to 20 years, depending on their level of involvement in the criminal enterprise. Dr. Hayes received a reduced sentence of 7 years in exchange for his cooperation with federal investigators. His recordings had been essential for securing convictions, but his participation in the conspiracy still required significant punishment. The civil lawsuits that followed allowed all of the victims to recover their stolen money, plus additional damages for the emotional trauma we had endured. I received not only my inheritance back, but also compensation for the medical expenses, legal fees, and lost income that resulted from David's crimes. But more importantly, the trials brought national attention to the issue of financial exploitation targeting vulnerable women. The media coverage helped other potential victims recognize warning signs and seek help before becoming trapped in similar situations. I used a portion of my settlement money to establish the Margaret Morrison Foundation, named after David's first victim who never had the chance to expose his crimes. The foundation provides legal assistance, counseling services, and financial support for women who have been victimized by domestic financial abuse. Patricia Coleman became the foundation's first program director after completing her recovery from the wrongful psychiatric treatment. Her experience navigating the mental health system made her uniquely qualified to help other women who had been falsely diagnosed or inappropriately committed. Sarah Martinez won a journalism award for her investigation into the financial exploitation network. Her reporting led to policy changes that require additional oversight of private psychiatric facilities and stricter regulations for emergency commitment procedures. The foundation has helped over 200 women in its first year of operation, providing everything from emergency housing to legal representation to therapeutic counseling. Many of our clients have become advocates themselves, working to prevent other women from experiencing similar victimization. I also began speaking at conferences and workshops about financial abuse, sharing my story to help others understand that these crimes can happen to anyone, regardless of education, income, or social status. The perpetrators are skilled manipulators who exploit trust and love to achieve their criminal goals. My personal recovery has been a gradual process that required extensive therapy to address the trauma of betrayal and the effects of being systematically poisoned for months. But I have learned that healing is possible when you have the support of people who genuinely care about your well-being. I met James Patterson, a federal prosecutor who worked on the case against David's network during the preparation for trial. Our relationship developed slowly over many months as I focused on recovery, and he respected my need for time and space to heal. James understood the importance of trust and transparency in relationships, and he never pressured me to move faster than I was comfortable with. His patience and genuine care helped me believe that healthy relationships were possible after experiencing such profound betrayal. We were married last spring in a small ceremony attended by Patricia, Sarah, Agent Chen, and other friends who had become my chosen family during the most difficult period of my life. The experience taught me that true strength comes not from enduring abuse, but from recognizing it and taking action to protect yourself and others. It also showed me the importance of trusting your instincts when something feels wrong, even if you cannot immediately explain why. Most importantly, I learned that helping other people heal from similar wounds brings meaning and purpose to the pain I experienced. Every woman we help through the foundation represents a victory against the criminals who try to exploit vulnerability and isolation. The final lesson from my experience is that recovery is not just about getting your life back to the way it was before. Recovery means building something better, stronger, and more meaningful than what existed before the trauma occurred. David's plan was to destroy my life and steal my future. Instead, his crimes led me to discover my true purpose and the strength I never knew I possessed. If you or someone you know has experienced financial abuse or domestic manipulation, please know that help is available and recovery is possible. Trust your instincts, seek support from qualified professionals, and remember that you deserve relationships built on honesty, respect, and genuine care. What would you do if you discovered that someone you trusted completely had been systematically betraying you? How would you find the courage to fight back against people who seem to have all the power and resources? Have you ever experienced a situation where trusting your instincts saved you from serious harm? I would love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Thank you for listening to my story and for supporting the work we do to help other survivors. Please like this video if it resonated with you. Subscribe to hear more stories of survival and recovery, and share this content with anyone who might benefit from understanding these warning signs. Remember that your voice and your story matter, and together we can create a world where vulnerable people are protected rather than exploited.